The 2026 F1 cars are continuing to improve and become much faster. 6 months ago, the original 2026 regulations were released and both teams and fans were not happy with the results. After several months of working on these regulations, we have much more refined and overall faster cars in the upcoming new regulations. So what's changed and how will it impact this era of F1? And we'll go over why these changes were necessary to both appeal to the drivers, teams, and us as fans. Right before getting started into this video, I wanted to thank you guys for the support. We're in the off season, but there's going to be plenty to go over. If you're new here, go ahead and subscribe. It would mean the world to me. Let's keep killing these goals. Let's go into 2025, finishing off 2024 strong. Let's start off with going from the front to the back for this Formula One car. Now, as I said, 6 months ago in June, we ended up getting the 2026 regulation car, and looking at it, obviously the concept now has gone from what was mostly outwashing on these new regulations. Obviously the floor was the most important part. We do have something to do with a floor now on the new version of these 2026 cars, but it won't be the focal point like it was in 22. These cars were also a good amount slower than that of the 2022 cars as soon as they came out. That has changed drastically. We'll talk about that as well. I want to start this car off from the front to the back so we can get the best idea of what has changed. We'll go over the 2026 car from 6 months ago to now and how teams can actually use this image and really the regulations themselves to start manipulating the car and gain a lot of speed in that wind tunnel for 26. The front wing end plate is going to be the first talking point as it's big, it's bulky, but they have changed how the flow on those end plates works. As you can see, there is a top part and a so-called appendage that's going to control partially the flow that's going to the tire from that end plate, and the bottom part has been kept pretty much the same, but they have changed that little vein on the left part of the end plate. There's also been a slight variation to that of the front wing flap angle and frontal shape really, but this is going to change a lot with the Formula One cars that we end up getting in 26, as the teams are definitely going to try and manipulate as much as possible that shape to dictate how the flow is entering the car, as it can be sometimes recognized as the most important piece aerodynamically on a Formula One car, as that is where the air is hitting first. There are also very slight things to the front of this car that are very important to notice. There is a change to that on the front brake, horizontal vanes on that duct. And a change that we're not seeing, but I guess it's kind of part of that front area, is the plank skid block, as that has now been reduced for these 2026 regulations. We also get some changes to the wheel covers. This is nothing really aerodynamic, but it could shred a little bit of weight onto that car. I hope this ends up looking a lot better than it's shown here. I do like it better than what we previously had, especially because that wheel cover is not something that most people really like to see on a Formula One car. It's an improvement, but I would like to take off the rest of that cover if possible. We then make our way to the most important section of the car, and yes, this is the floor section. With that floor fence, it is now changed. It's actually two different elements that can now be reshaped and done by the teams. As I said, the full focus point on these cars is in-wash, as the previous floor iteration was a big focal point on taking that dirty air, especially through those Venturi tunnels, and outwashing that from the car to have as much clean flow go through that car and give you a more aero-efficient car. It is also slightly smaller to that of the previous iteration. There have also been front floor vanes added. This is a big change here, so there is somewhat ground aerodynamics. While there always has been, this will help add downforce, which will significantly increase the car's cornering speed. And it's not anything close to the extreme Venturi tunnels we have on our current cars right now in these regulations, but more similar to that of 2021 with the barge boards. It's not exactly that, but it's more similar to that than the current regulations we have right now. There will be a flat middle section of the floor. This is exactly like the 2021 cars. And as we make our way towards the back, it also has changed that the rear wing is much bigger than it was in that previous iteration 6 months ago. There is also a slight curve added now. Before, it was flat on both planes. And another big focal point in adding downforce, it is a much larger diffuser, and really that step in entry. You can see it from the top here, but that's going to add a lot of downforce and probably not be great for those rainy conditions, but a little bit better than what we currently have. The diffuser is much bigger on our 2024/2025 cars. It'll be smaller here, but still add a good chunk of downforce. The beam wing has also changed, but right here it's a little aired up. in this render, so we'll have to see that on a different render of theirs. Now here's a couple things to note here, and the latest information that we have to the public that has been shared. These cars in 2026 were going to be about 7 to 8 seconds slower initially when looking at the regulations. Some reports said 4 to 5 seconds, you could see 6 seconds, some said 8 seconds. All in all, we were not going to get cars that were even close to these current regulations in speed. But now it is being reported that it's about 2 seconds slower, and that's really going off of what the FIA has instituted. I mean, when Adrian Newey gets a hand at one of these cars, I think we'll see these cars be very close to that of the 2022 cars, and obviously it'll go up in speed as more upgrades are added and teams figure out what is the best way to go about these cars, like they have figured out in 2024. Now there is still the X and the Z mode, which can be used at any time as of right now, but it's also being said that the X mode will reduce the drag of both the front and the rear wing, significantly improve aerodynamic efficiency on the straights. And this has been talked about. The biggest problem with these cars was they were going to be really quick in the straights, almost hitting 350 kilometers on pretty much any track that there's even a decent straight. But then going into the corners, they're going to look a lot like Indy cars, which was a huge problem for both a viewing pleasure, but also if it's going to be the pinnacle of motorsport, it's got to still have that crazy speed going through any of those corners. With this, we get a compromise of it being a much less draggier car, while also having a lot less dirty air. And while the original 2026 had much less dirty air, I guess you could say it was a bit more of a racier car, but those overtakes wouldn't be as impressive as we get nowadays. Where this is still very unknown is in the race, because race pace will be completely different to what we see nowadays, and we'll really only know after those 9 days of testing that we get when these 2026 regulations really kick in 2026 of February. Qualifying pace and the actual overall cars will have more downforce to be faster, and that will be much more pleasurable. But in the race, figuring out this car with a completely different engine is a big mystery to all Formula One teams, and how the race is managed, just like nowadays when they're managing the tires, will probably be done completely differently. Whether that will be for the better or the worse, I'm not exactly sure. That is still a very big question mark for us as fans, but even for the teams who have no clue how it's going to go down day one, whether it's in Bahrain or Australia for testing. The car itself has now been seen in these real life renders, and I think it looks beautiful. While these aerodynamic changes do make the car look just that much better, I think overall we're getting a much more better looking car than we currently have. I don't mind the way that these cars look right now, but we're definitely missing a bit of that 08, 09 touch when those cars just looked like animals. And I think we're finally getting that. I'm very happy with these changes, but what do you guys think? These cars will be quicker, and I'm very happy to be sharing this information. Good job. Hopefully there's a couple of other iterations. Will this be the final piece? I'm not exactly sure yet, but the FIA has done a very good job at improving this car and making it much faster with better downforce, while also not leaning too much into the dirty air. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a like and subscribe. It would mean the world, and peace.